I'm Simon Jordan. You'll probably be familiar with me interviewing people with strong views.
But it's about time someone had a word with him about his vacuous opinions.
That's why myself, Troy Deeney, and the legend that is Graeme Souness have joined forces with Mr. Simon Jordan to create Free Up Front, brought to you by William Hill.
This is a new show that tells it like it really is.
And it reaches in to all corners of the game we truly love.
Everything that matters to you is analysed through the eyes of a player,
A manager.
And an owner, as we tackle the biggest talking points in world football on Free Up Front.
So subscribe to the Upfront channel for new weekly episodes.
And don't forget to go back for some of my upfront episodes. Not bad, if I do say so myself. One of my pet peeves and a vacuum in society is a lack of leadership. So given the fact that I'm sat here with two boys, men, that have both been captains at their football clubs, I thought it might be a nice conversation to discuss leadership and what it looks like and what it entails in sport and specifically football. Your views, gentlemen.
Well, obviously, I'm not in the dressing room anymore if we're talking about football, but I do think it's changed. I'm not sure if the senior players today want to take as much responsibility as the players of my day. I hope that doesn't sound like an old man talking about when I played, when I did this. But I think that's maybe just in society as well. I think the modern player today, I think, is less reluctant to stand up and be counted when the going gets tough. You know, we're all leaders, we're all winners when you're winning every week. Mm-hmm. And I would say that to, you walk into a dressing room for the first time, I say, we'll soon find out about each other when we lose a few games back to back, and we'll see if we're all winners and, we're all big personalities. You hear it all the time when you're winning. We're strong dressing room, we're all in it together. We win and we lose together. And then after a few bad results, you see everyone looking for the exit door. So I'm not sure if they existed like they used to.
Were you leaders, both of you? I mean, I know what I think leadership means, but I asked the question of you first before I espoused the word of my opinion. You were both captains. Do you consider yourself to have been leaders? Do you consider yourself a leader?
Yeah, I would in my time. Yeah, I would say.
In what way?
In exactly what you said. Being a major part of creating the culture that ended up getting Watford promoted and staying in the Premier League. I wasn't blessed enough to play with unbelievably good players with a history at Liverpool that you already had. Do you know there was a desire and a standard that needed to be hit? I would imagine in your time, we had to create that and curate that with the players that were coming in and from different nationalities. So I would say that for that. But I always think leadership is based on somebody else saying that's the guy we can count on. Would you agree?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to talk about myself. Much prefer you asked on this particular subject. I think I believe I was a good leader when I was a captain, but I never shouted and bawled at anyone.
Is that what leadership entails, though?
At that time at that football club, it was just about you do your job properly.
Yeah, concentrate.
I remember Joe Fagan saying to me when they made me manager, you don't do anything different. Do your job properly. If you're having a good day, help those around you. But when I went back as manager to Liverpool, I remember saying to Ronnie Whelan and Ian Rush, what's happened to the dressing room? And both of them said, well, no one listens anymore. So the kids just don't listen anymore. They won't take any notes of you. I said to Ronnie Whelan, I said, well, go through a few in training. So in 8 years since I'd gone, that dressing room had changed. And I don't, and then obviously I had the best part of 20 years as a manager. And I had some real men when I was at Glasgow Rangers. And this is why I always preach that you've got no chance of being successful unless you've got good senior pros. They're the leaders. In my very first job, I had very little to do after a couple of years because I had Terry Butcher, Mark Haitley, Richard Gough, Ray Wilkins, and others who would do my job for me.
But what is the essence of leadership? I mean, it gets thrown around quite a lot.
It's standing up and being counted when the going gets tough.
Right.
Everyone's a leader. Everyone's a winner. Everyone's a team player. We're all in it together when you're winning. Mm-hmm. And very few stand up to be counted when the going gets tough.
But it must change, mustn't it, in terms of responsibility? You're captains of a team, right? But there's a guy above you that's the manager. Mm-hmm. And that's a different kind of leadership. Now, you've had a little tilt of it briefly. And we'll talk about your tilt in a second. But you had a much more expansive tilt. 107 clubs.
Yeah.
Whatever many you had.
800 I think it was 890 games.
Yeah.
And I have to say, looking back on my managerial career, I made one obvious mistake all the time. I wasn't accepting of the standards. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't get over why they couldn't do simple things that I was asking them to do on a football pitch. Because they weren't good enough.
No, not them. Why couldn't you have the bandwidth as a leader to be able to be tolerant of one thing and recognise that not everyone can reach the standards that you would have reached?
Because I found it very difficult.
Why?
What I deemed to be a simple thing to get, like not really hurting when you lose a game, shaking hands with people, wanting to change shirts after a game, wanting to laugh and joke on the bus on the way home. I was never accepting that. That's something I could never accept. And I just found it very frustrating. And that would show itself in both in words and deeds, and when players weren't getting it.
Do you look back on that as something that you perhaps should have been prepared to compromise on?
Yes.
Because you've had this walk recently, haven't you? You made a decision. I mean, I would have personally, going to your situation with Forest Green Rovers and Dale Vince, which was an interesting choice in the first place, going to work for Dale, but that's a different discussion. But I would have personally sat with you as the owner of the football club and said, you're a player manager, you're inexperienced, so I'm going to want you to vent your spleen. You're transitioning in from a player into an authoritative figure, beyond being a captain, into a person of influence that makes decisions. You're not going to be popular all the time with the players. So I would have been on you saying any problems that you've got, I don't want to hear them through the media. I want to hear them. If you've got a problem with the players, you don't like a performance, you come and tell me, don't tell the media. When you had that outburst on television, I think we discussed it before and said, I don't know, Troy, that wasn't the greatest thing to have done. What was the thinking behind the leadership outcome that you were trying to achieve?
The outcome of trying to achieve on that is we'd had the conversation. I was only in there for four weeks in total. We had Christmas, so it was, as you know, very quickly it turned over 6.
Oh, I've had a 6.
Yeah, so it's very quick.
6 games.
So quick.
It's that one.
I didn't get that one. I didn't get that one. No, so my leadership outcome was we've shown, we've spoken, we've gone through all of the different ways to get you to see it privately. Now I need to make a big statement piece. And at the time I went for Dabo, Frankie Dabo, who was probably our most recognisable player in that situation, that he just missed out the Coventry penalty miss. And I thought he could be playing better and he could probably take it a bit more, because all the conversations made you think he was that kind of player that could take the criticism. But ultimately, the biggest mistake I made was doing it publicly. Doing it and just speaking to Frank.
That's
he should have stayed. Yeah, but I should know better. And that's the thing I would change.
I tell you what, the principle I used to work to, I felt we're all in it together.
Absolutely.
Again, this is how I was educated.
Yeah.
We're all in it together. If I've got anything to say to you, I'll sit in front of the 25 other guys.
Yeah, and
I'm not sure if they're like that today.
What I found very quickly over a 3-year period, so I went from being Watford in the Premier League to Birmingham in the Championship to Forest Green in League Two in the 3-year period, very quick. And I felt that when you was at the top, there was never a discussion about finance, about anything. It was just about winning. That was all that mattered. When I moved down the levels, it was self-preservation. A lot of, if ever a goal went in, it was that. A lot of finger
because
my man didn't score.
And you started going into those kind of things. And I probably struggled getting my head around that, similar to your point a little bit earlier about, well, it's all about winning. It doesn't matter if I score, you score, Simon scores. That doesn't matter. But I think I've always wanted to ask this question, and I don't have your circle of friends to ask many owners. How many friends has he got that own
He hasn't got many friends.
Has he not?
I thought all my friends.
He's only two
friends were owners. Every time an owner comes up, Daniel Levy is my mate. Todd Bowley, he's my mate. They're all my mates when it comes to
just in the hiring process.
Yeah.
Have you? First of all, what are you looking for in regard to leadership for your particular club? And then secondly on that, have you ever had a situation where somebody's presented to you, thought, right, that's the one, and within a week, a month, you've realised they're not what they said on the tin?
Yeah, of course you have. I mean, I
You had 8 of them.
Well, no, that's not true, really.
7 then?
No, not
at all.
9? I'll qualify it for you again to help you along the way. The thing I tried to do in interviews when I was interviewing a manager was I want a leader. I don't need, if I'm the leader, if I'm the strongest person in the room for the football operation, then there's a really big problem. So what I wanted was people that were very capable of exhibiting what I thought were very simple characteristics. I want them to motivate, to inspire. I want them to have discipline. I want them to be able to control the environment that they're supposed to operate. And I want them to be able to control themselves in all circumstances. What I did when I spoke to him in 2006 about joining Palace, when I spoke to Steve Bruce, when I spoke to...
What was the conversation like with him?
It was very... I was an admirer of his because I knew that he was a very strong character.
Was is important.
Yeah, because familiarity breeds a different dynamic, doesn't it? Once you find out that it's all fur coat, no knickers, you work out a little differently. But no, I was an admirer of the fact that I knew he had the strength of character. I knew the problems I had. Yeah. And I knew that potentially having watched him in his career, watched him specifically in the flesh at Blackburn, and the strength of his personality would have been a good thing for my football club, given the players I had at that particular time.
We would actually got on very well.
Yeah, very clear. I'm very clear with my parameters of how I work with people. But going to the interview stage, I put managers very clearly into focus, which was I didn't want their interview face. I didn't want the idea of them telling me what I wanted to hear. I wanted them to understand what kind of person I was, because I'm a leader. Yeah. I'm very definite what I want. I think you have to make unpopular decisions. I think you have to be fair. I think you have to be equitable. You have to be consistent. You have to remind people of their responsibilities whilst honouring your own. You have to do what you say you're going to do and make them do theirs. Yeah. And I think ultimately these are all component parts of being a leader. I think if you're fair, people can take being told when they're wrong if you're fair. And treating people with respect and treating people to some extent, this is why I slightly disagree with the principle of giving someone a bollocking in front of everybody, because the only way you give someone a bollocking is if you know how they're going to take it. Because if you give somebody a bollocking, you don't know how they're going to take it. The only person that feels better is you. Yeah. You want an outcome. You want an outcome.
No. Again, I come back to that's how it was when I was a player.
But you were in a group of players at Liverpool. Did they do it at Middlesbrough? Did they do it at Spurs?
Well, Jack Charlton did, yeah.
Maybe.
But it was a different era and it was more accepting. It was like you are in this together and can you use this term anymore? Man up. You had to deal with it. Yeah. That criticism today, I think they're protected from criticism today. In the modern game today, this is how I see it. In my day, when we played badly, it was the players got it. He wasn't very good. He missed his season. I don't think the players get any criticism today. I think it's always about the manager, his tactics, his formation, his substitutions. The manager gets it. Yeah. And I think that's how it's evolved. I think players escape more or less scot-free today.
But isn't it also because we've alighted upon the fact that ultimately the finances have changed? That makes people's thought processes become more sharpened, doesn't it?
The players are put on a pedestal today. This is just the psyche with the man in the street. Oh, he's earning 100 grand. He must be a really good player if he earns that. Doesn't mean he is. And they put them up there. And these players walk around and act apart.
But how many coaches now and institutions in terms of whoever, Man United, whoever you want to talk about, look after these kids now because you play for Man United and we give them the little passes.
You know what it always leads back to? What? Good senior players.
Yeah.
We talk of leaders. Man United, you mentioned institution, Fernandes. At Liverpool 2 seasons and a half ago.
When they lost.
They were 3-0 down. Yeah. I was doing the game. He just threw the towel in. He's the captain. If anything, when you're a captain, if you were to have a bad day, you should still be contributing, running around with enthusiasm, helping if you can.
Question for both of you. Do you think you can change? So do you think Fernandes can change into a good leader, or do you think a leader is who you're born with?
I think everyone can evolve. Everyone can change, everyone can sophisticate and enhance, but you are fundamentally what you are. If you've got the ability to bite, bollock and bark, and you can do that, and it's a natural go-to solution for problems, then you can do it if that's what's required. If you manufacture it, people will know it.
We see right through it. Yeah. As a manager, you have to be consistent. You have to, what you are on day one has to be after day 365.
I'm saying as a player. So you just said you use Fernandes. So do you think how he was 2 years ago, and let's say going into this season?
No, I don't think. I think it's in him. The shrugging the shoulders, waving his arms around.
You think that's his default factor? That's who he is at his core.
Do you think there are fewer leaders in the modern game? Do you think there are?
I think they hide, Simon. I think they don't want to put themselves up there and be counted. And stand up and take the flak. When it was all going wrong. When England in these recent Euros and they were having a difficult time, who was up talking to the press all the time? The youngest member of the group, Jude Bellingham. For me, he should have been the last one to go up. It should have been the senior player stepping up and saying, we know we can do better. I know I've not done well personally. We must strive. And they kept putting him up.
Do you think Harry Kane's a leader? Because I don't. And without betraying confidences, I'm not entirely sure other football clubs that he's played for think he was a natural leader.
2 years' time, Bellingham will be captain of that team.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you think it's going to be Bellingham?
2 years' time, World Cup, Bellingham will be captain of that team.
bit of a different one. I thought Granit Xhaka was a very good captain.
I think it's a humiliation and an embarrassment that we haven't won a tournament in 60 years. I think it's a shocker. But if you look at the situation surrounding England over the recent Euros, and this avalanche apparently of criticism, which was nothing compared to the avalanche of criticisms that have gone in the past. I mean, you've got the national coach on the front page of a newspaper with a turnip on his head in Graham Taylor's instance. Do you think that when Gareth and the players came out and talked about the criticism they received, that exhibited the sort of characteristics of leadership and strong characters that you would want to have representing you in any other forum?
You can deal with it.
I didn't think so. I thought if Gareth had gone out to the media and gone, I tell you what, you lot. No, we're not playing. I'm not asking him to be Mike Bassett, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, I tell you what, you lot, we haven't played very well, but we're still in this bloody tournament and we're going to get better. That they might have been better healed to have said that.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think also as well, though, Graham. I think it's just we talk about times and things like that. I think everyone is protecting themselves for the next job and for the next situation.
He would have consulted.
Absolutely, on the walkway in.
Psychologist.
Yeah.
Now, how should we deal with this?
Absolutely, media guy, and all of that.
Do you think Gareth Southgate is a leader?
I think he's a type of leader. I think he's a leader. I think he's a good leader. I don't think he's a serial winner. That's what I would say.
Cups.
It's interesting because, I say interesting, it's not necessarily a word I'd put in conjunction with Gary Neville, but I'll read you what Gary Neville said about the characteristics of leadership. And he played for Ferguson, so he knows what leadership looks like. He's played alongside Keane. If you write down, this is about Gareth Southgate, Gray. If you wrote down the 5 or 6 characteristics you'd want in a leader, your boss or your teacher, of your child, you'd want them to be honest, have compassion and empathy, be capable, have integrity and calmness in difficult situations. And I look at Gareth and he has all of those qualities. I think we're obsessed with having a big character as a leader. Those qualities are more important.
You're talking about a comparison with teaching your child in the hard-nosed business of professional sport.
Yeah.
So the demands are very different. Compassion, truthfulness, to a degree.
Yeah.
It's not the most important thing. I mean, I'm talking about teaching your 12-year-old child and trying to get the best out of a 28-year-old multi-millionaire is a very different task.
Southgate's style, to me, is management by consultation, and management by concession to some extent. And then you've got Didier Deschamps, for example. He doesn't appear to give a rat's arse about what people think. And if you don't like his football team, go watch something else, was his message to the media. And I don't know which, I know which management style.
Having won the World Cup.
Well, this is the point, isn't it? He has that get out of jail card, which means he's won something.
I know what I'm doing.
But I know which kind of management style I would prefer to see represented, and which leadership qualities I think are more compelling. Do you think Harry Kane's a leader? Because I don't. And without betraying confidences, I'm not entirely sure other football clubs that he's played for think he was a natural leader.
Well, you're close to the owners, these football clubs, aren't you?
Well, you can read between the lines, can't you?
But I look Chris on your backside.
But I look at the England team, and I think the team reflects leadership, right?
I'm saying,
if you don't have a leader,
why? Because we go back to Jude Bellingham being pushed up to take the flak and being put in the firing all the time by so-called leaders. He shouldn't have been anywhere near that. If
you get to the next World Cup, which I'm assuming we will do, with whomsoever is managing the team as the leader of the team, do you think Harry Kane will still be there? And if he's not, who is the natural successor? Because I don't think he's a leader. I think he's a leader by example. But I think when the bullets start
2 years'
flying,
time, Bellingham will be captain of that team.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you think it's going to be Bellingham?
2 years' time, World Cup, Bellingham will be captain of that team.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, just to answer your question, I think Harry will go because he's earned it from past.
2 years' time.
2 years' time, yeah. I think he'll still be scoring goals in Germany. I think he'll still be doing well. And I think he'll go off of the strength of that he guarantees us goals.
Well, he's 31 sometime this month, I think.
So he's 33. He's not old.
Lewandowski's not slowed down, is he?
Exactly. Just a question for you. If you were looking at it, and let's hypothetically say you're at the FA and we know your opinions on them, but you had a decision to make now, what are you looking for for the next manager?
Well, all the things that we've discussed and danced around the flames of, which is leadership. I mean, who should have been employed as England manager in the 1970s? I'll tell you who should have been employed, Brian Clough. because he was a natural leader, wasn't in a popularity contest. But what he'd done, it was caused the FA problems because they wouldn't have been able to manage him. Should they have got rid of Venables? And I've got form with Terry, God rest his soul. But should they have got rid of Venables in '96? Or whenever he was asked to leave after the Euros? No, they shouldn't, because he was doing a good job. What I would want to see is somebody they're not worried about the PR offensive that goes with it. They want somebody that's a winner. The French FA don't care if Didier Deschamps tells the fucking media to go and watch another game. They don't like it.
World Cup. You couldn't say that if you hadn't won a World Cup.
No, sure, but you've got to win somewhere along the line, haven't you? And you're not going to win by being a shrinking violet and playing the game. You're going to win by being definitely right or definitely wrong, but ideally definitely right, but being bloody definite. That's what's going to mean, and that's what Southgate, to my mind, has lacked a little bit of. But I don't know how much you can answer, how much more you can answer a question, but then saying that the FA don't want leaders. They don't produce an environment where they want leaders. They want people that are malleable and manageable and do the right things and write brilliant letters like "Dear England" in the 21.
That will not have been him.
But so have we?
That will not have been him.
So do we get to a point?
I think it was.
So do we get to a point then where we
was.
have to start accepting that this is who and what we are as a nation then?
It depends what you think who and what we are as a nation.
We are nearly.
I think it's a humiliation and an embarrassment that we haven't won a tournament in 60 years. I think it's a shocker. I really do. You can write off the 70s because of Don Revie and because of the passing of Alf Ramsey in terms of coming out of international management and the accession of Ron Greenwood, and you can look for the 80s and 90s. But when you've got the most powerful domestic football league in world football, most of the best players are playing in England, and you've got the opportunity, then we should be winning tournaments. And that comes down to leadership, comes down from leadership from the FA about who they recruit, to leadership of the manager, down to leadership of players. And if you don't create a culture of people taking responsibility and being able to stand up to some form of scrutiny, then you'll never produce an outcome. And that's half our problem from this tournament. Maybe if the players and the management had accepted the scrutiny a little bit better than they did, they might have galvanised themselves a little bit more and been a bit fucking more braver on the pitch. Because if you look at the results, and we've talked about this in another show, it's not these players can't do it. There's some reason why they're not doing it. And you use the word bravery, and bravery is indexed to leadership.
That's been absent. They only showed real mettle when they went behind in games. You know, taking the risk, playing the ball forward, risk losing it, instead of being worried about your pass completion stats, which is for another day. But England are so much better than what they've shown in the last 7 games. These players, individually, collectively, are so much better. And that must be a disappointment for the players and every supporter.
When you think of leaders, both now and in the past, just out of curiosity, not to do a list of things that people want to do, but I'm just curious, when you think of leaders that have played, I mean, I would think of him as a leader, even though he's adamantly wasn't a growler. That's the perception he gives to people. When you think of leaders when you played, who were the leaders that stood out for you? And then same for you.
Obvious ones, Vincent Kompany. I remember every time he used to go to Man City, the way that he conducted himself around the place, the way that people would just look up at him. He'd speak and everyone, yes, sir. It just had this aura that everyone you saw their shoulders go up and back. He would be the obvious one that when he was talking, everybody did it. I thought a bit of a different one. I thought Granit Xhaka was a very good captain. But I know he had his moments where he kind of left out on the pitch, but then to come back from that, reinvent himself and show the true version of him, I thought that they were the 2, and then Jordan Henderson. They were the 3 that when we watched.
Really?
Yeah, thought Jordan did really well in terms of what he would do for his group at that time. Is he my type of captain? Probably not, but he was also very forthright in his opinion and what he thought, got his group on side and ultimately won, which is what it's all about in their objective. So I would say those were the 3 that stood out for me.
Do you think Roy Keane was leader?
Yeah.
Both by example and by the very nature of what he says. I mean, do you think he's a leader? I think he's a leader in broadcasting now because I don't think he really cares what he says and says what other people think. I think also Steve Bruce. I had him at Palace, and when I interviewed him, I thought categorically leader.
Yeah.
You know, when I saw him interact with the players.
What stood out for that? Sorry, just to know.
Just very definite. I mean, very, very definite. And you could see why he was the captain of Man United. You don't get to be the captain of Man United under Alex Ferguson that wins the Premier League, the first Premier League, the inaugural Premier League that Man United start their engines when the fucking money comes in again. And Steve Bruce is at the front of the queue. And when I interviewed him, I sat there and thought to myself, initially I didn't like him. because he'd been the manager of Huddersfield Town and I'd seen him in the dugout play against us, and he was just awful with his chairman, and I told his chairman to fire him. So ironically, I'm interviewing him a year later, and Brucey's sitting in front of him, and I told him, I said, with all due respect, I was forced to interview by an agent that was very busy, and why would I want to employ a total like you?
Yeah.
And Brucey went, I thought it was going to be a strong interview, but this is really strong. Okay, I'll tell you. Yeah. And then when I employed him, it was, the manner in which he ran the training ground, the players knew where they stood. The kids were told to get in and clean the gym, despite the best endeavours of the PFA and whatever else, to be able to set standards. So it was very clear. But I saw a leader, and I know what a leader looks like, and that was a leader. And I think that the idea that that's disappeared is not for me a reality. It's just that people are getting slightly more sanitised. When you look back at Ferguson.
Can I tell you a story about leaders?
Go.
How it's changed. In my very last job, I got there was a local journalist giving the team unbelievable criticism. And I got 3 senior players in and said, look, I know you speak to this guy. I'm asking you not to speak to him. We might put some manners on him. And it went silent. And it was like, I wish I hadn't been asked this. And after about 5-6 seconds of silence, I said, I tell you what, let's forget I asked this question. I got up and left the room. What I was basically asking is, you support your teammates who are getting criticised, more than criticised, by this fool. And I thought, you're not prepared to stand up for your teammates? And I thought, this is a more difficult job than I thought it was going to be at Newcastle.
Leadership takes courage as well.
Well, I'm sorry. It's your team. If someone was saying something about your teammate, I would not need the manager to come in. If he was being overtly critical, I would not have needed the manager to say to me, can we stay on side with this? We'll park him and not speak to him.
I think it transcends into real life. For example, if I was walking through London and someone said, oh, I don't like that Simon, or no. We're on a team. You can't talk bad about these guys. Yeah, but that's true. I think it's the same thing.
That's what Graeme does. He talks behind me back.
Oh, does it? Yeah, sorry.
Every opportunity, and I've got so much to talk about.
Terry's another leader.
It's like the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah. John Terry's another leader.
Sorry, I should have put John in that as well.
John Terry's another leader.
Yeah.
When you look at Ferguson, and you look at and he's always the go-to example, because ultimately, if you've managed the biggest football club in the world and you manage it reputedly,
built 3 or 4 teams
with them, and built 3 or 4 teams, do you think there is ever going to be an opportunity for a manager to have that kind of leadership capability inside a football club as we see it?
No.
Or is it only the precinct of Pep Guardiola now because he's winning all the time?
Yeah. I have to say I was partly responsible for him staying on, I was at dinner with him. I said, why are you joking? I said, I've got everything sorted. He said, nah, I've had enough. Just get me down, the sort of pressures of the job. I've just had enough. I said, well, you're mad. That team's going to run itself for the next few years. Anyway, whether it was I was partly responsible and not responsible, but he stayed on. And that was someone who had built the team.
Was it the dreadful performance of Liverpool?
It was. This was years later.
How was it? Okay.
When Man United were actually winning things.
I think to answer your question, I don't think you can have that anymore. I think it's
no chance.
In my opinion, I think the most valuable part of any football club now is the director of football.
Really?
I think that's becoming the new role.
The most important part are players, but to get the players in, it might be the decision makers who decide that player's good for us.
Yeah, of course. But
I think Arteta's got a chance of longevity at Arsenal.
Just because of the Edu relationship?
I think because they've got a strong football board that are making good decisions. Obviously, being spies, the allure of a Barcelona or Real Madrid might be too much for him. But he was ex-Barcelona, wasn't he?
Do you not still think that the ultimate authority over the football team is the manager? So he lives and dies by his own leadership capabilities.
The most important thing we come back to, and I think we'll agree, is recruitment.
Yeah.
So you're the manager, you're sitting there, relying on director of football to bring the players in, but you're not bringing the proper players in. Ultimately, you will sack me because I'm not getting the tune out of those players. You won't say, I didn't give him very good players. It'll be he can't get the best out of these great players I've supplied for him.
So that's not about leadership, though, is it? That's about the division of labour and who gets blamed and apportioned with the right or wrong amount of blame for the outcomes, right? Mm-hmm. But within the confines of a dressing room, do you think, because so much credit is attributed, you say perhaps unfairly or correctly at times, that the players get away with it. Mm-hmm. But do we not still think that...
Well, hold on. We've had it this last 2 months.
What, with
Sorry,
Pochettino?
last month.
With Pochettino?
No, this last month
Go on.
with the national team.
Right.
Who's getting all the flack?
The coach.
Where do you apportion the blame? How much to the manager? How much to the player? And I would suggest that the players have still got away relatively scot-free compared to the criticism the manager got.
I've had my dime store tour rant. I mean, in order to, and leaders lead.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't manufacture them. They're natural. You can show them the way. I mean, how do you see leadership evolving in the future? You have had your time running a football club as a manager and playing it. You potentially will have your time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think the direction you want to go in, don't you?
Yep.
I mean, how do you see leadership evolving in the future? As a person that might have to deal with it a bit more. We're getting older. We don't have to deal with it and put up with it sometimes. You're going to have to work within the confines of it.
I think Graeme touched on it a little bit earlier. A lot more courses, a lot more presentations, a lot more managing up is my early expectation of that in terms of being aligned to the whole business plan.
What's managing up mean?
Managing up to
people
your,
like you.
I know what it means, but I want to tell me what it means.
Managing up to your director of football, knowing that you are the way you are, that you might not have the final say on the player that comes in.
Yeah.
And I think, forgetting
You
that
need a course in that, do you?
I think so, yeah, because
Really?
I think all the managers I come up, because remember, most of our experiences have been on what you've seen and what you've had. My best and proper coach was Sean Dyche.
Yeah.
No one told Sean who was coming in. He made sure it all happened.
Fine.
And I think that's starting to move out now with this new crop of coach. So I think, a course to help and understand the why and the betters of that. We all can have an opinion on it. But why that works in football and why that works with people. And a lot of the jobs now, let's be fair, are people that haven't been in football. They're IT consultants, they're very smarter accountants that have gone into those roles because they know that the stats and figures better than probably we do. But we can do the eye test. So it's now finding that balance between the two. And I think the new way of leadership is totally
I don't think it would be
understanding
more difficult to be a manager than this today.
Based on what?
Well, given that you talk about managing up, given the people you're answerable to, and that's what's seen me off.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be answerable to people like that.
Yeah.
We would have got on well. But there are people that I just did not want to be answerable to anymore. Mm-hmm. And I think then if you're working at the highest level, you have to deal with young men who are wealthy beyond their dreams. Mm-hmm. And that gives them an edge, which makes them difficult to deal with. It gives them an independence, an opinion. Players today are so opinionated. Mm-hmm. They're opinionated not just in football matters. They feel they can talk about anything and everything that's going. And I don't think it's ever been more difficult to be a manager today.
Just to close off from you, from the point of view from you, Troy, if you're going to go evolving forward, and I personally don't think you need courses. I think you need common sense.
Yeah.
But if you're looking back at the people that you've worked with and for, who would you take things from?
Marco Silva, weirdly. I think just the way he's recreated himself. Obviously, the way he left Watford was difficult, but the players were on side. Was
it Everton he went to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. And then obviously that didn't end up well, goes away. And then now you look at him at Fulham, he's a completely different character. The way he presents himself is completely different.
He went back to Portugal, Braga. Was it Braga?
Yeah.
So he's had 18. The reason why I asked him, because he's had 18 experiences of different managers.
Yes.
So if anyone's going to be able to tell us what they might have taken from different experiences, it's probably him. We know who you've worked with.
As I said, don't you start. And no, I think Marco's been a great example of figuring out the landscape, going away, working on it, and going and getting better. And yeah, that would be the one for me. I think I look at Gianfranco, who I know you interviewed. Right. Yeah. Gianfranco was the nicest person in the world, and it ended up backfiring on him because he was so nice.
He must have taken stuff from Dyche.
All day, still do to this day.
Why did it backfire on Gianfranco?
Because he was too nice. He was too trusting to the players. He gave everything. And in today's world, unfortunately, there's loads of ways around. If this is the manager, there's loads of ways around the manager to the owner, to the director of football, through agents.
That's the beginning of the end for a manager.
And I think
a player can go around you and get to...
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's what John Terry said about the two differences in the Mourinho regime. Mm-hmm. In 2004, he doesn't have anybody going around him.
Yeah.
And in 2015, he has people going to Marina, going Bruce to Spark. Eugene Tenenbaum, going to Bruce Spark, and that was not the same authority.
That cuts your legs off as a manager.
Anyway, in our own little way, we've pulled the bones out of leadership. Hopefully it's been insightful. We'll see you next time we're out.
This has been Three Up Front, brought to you by William Hill.
Subscribe to the channel for weekly episodes.
And don't forget to go back for some of my upfront episodes. Not bad if I do say so myself.
18 plus, please gamble responsibly.